Hey everyone, this is Dr. William Clark here for the Dr. William Clark podcast. Glad to be with you again for another podcasting opportunity. This is our time where we get together and we talk about all things fundraising, grant writing, etc., as it relates to your nonprofit. And so, if you are in need of some guidance, some ideas, some concepts to help you continue to build towards developing your nonprofit or funding a special project that you care deeply about, this is the podcast for you. So, I want to talk quickly about this idea of how do you know or how do you determine if you need a grant writer rather. How do you determine if you need a grant writer? Now, this is a kind of a touchy topic for a number of nonprofits, particularly if you're starting out or if you're trying to go to the next phase of your life cycle of your nonprofit. And in saying that you need a grant writer can be indicative of a number of organizational challenges you're trying to overcome and resolve. Look, if you're new starting out, you're trying to figure out how do we get our first grant. And the first thing I'll tell you as it relates to getting your first grant, you might not be able to get your first grant for a while if you are a brand new organization. And this is why I have my new free webinar, what you should know before you go after your grants, and how to find the right partner to land your next grant, because partnerships is really the key to landing your first grant if you're out the gate. Now, if you're at this point where you've gotten a couple of grants and you feel like, okay, I want to take it to the next level and raise things up a notch, then you have to start looking at what do you got to do to secure someone to help you with grant writing, whether it's a full-time employee, whether it's a consultant, or whether it's someone who can just volunteer their time, a board member, an invested community member, etc. How do you know you need a grant writer? And I think there are a couple of things you might want to consider if you're thinking about getting a grant writer, etc. The first thing is, what is it that you're trying to do? Right? Are you trying to raise money for a program? Are you trying to increase the profile of your program? Are you trying to increase the revenue size of your program, etc.? There needs to be details about what you're trying to accomplish, because that type of information, that type of perspective about what you're trying to do puts into perspective who you need to bring on the team, whether it's a full-time person or this is someone that you hire as a consultant. This allows you to think through, if we bring somebody on board, like, what are we using them for? What are we hiring them for? What are they trying to do? What gaps are they filling for us? So what is it that you're trying to accomplish? The second thing that you want to consider if you need a grant writer is, if you are definitely in need of a grant writer, is it because there's a lack of skill, or is it a lack of capacity? Those two categories says a lot about the decision you have to make. The lack of skill says we may not have good writers on staff. That's part of the issue. The lack of skill can also speak to, we may have amazing writers on staff, but we don't have people who are comfortable with and really good at grant writing as it stands in its purest form. And that could be very well true. Like, I have no commentary on that. It does depend on the type of skill set you have within your organization and what you're trying to accomplish. But lack of skill can be one of the biggest impediments to you not achieving any of your fundraising goals as it relates to grant writing. So if you don't have folks that are capable of writing well, and you don't have folks who are capable of writing grants well, then that could speak to some of the lack of skill you do not have on staff. The other issue you might want to look at in terms of why you may need a grant writer is capacity. Let's say you do have people who write well. Let's say you do have people who can write grants well and they have a successful track record. But what about capacity? Capacity speaks to, do they have time to actually write a grant on top of the other work that they are responsible for? That's a capacity issue. And I have podcasted in the past. I've taught a class on my online classroom platform about how to expand capacity. There are strategies that you can deploy that can help you expand capacity if, in fact, that's an issue. But if you are truly at your wit's end and you do not have enough staff, or you have absolutely no staff to help you with expanding the capacity of your organization to write grants, then you need a grant writer. The other reason why you might need a grant writer is you have a complex grant that is on the street, an RFP, if you will, and it is so complex, you need someone to help break it down and decipher it and write it for you. This does not speak to the lack of skill or capacity. This speaks to, we just need an outside perspective. We need an outside brain to help us think through, how to process through this particular grant opportunity, especially if you know that you're really good as an organization. You know that your chances of landing this grant are fairly high, and you want a third party individual who can help you process through the paperwork of writing a grant and positioning the organization to actually win the grant. When you consider those facts, when you consider those scenarios, this is when you want to start thinking about hiring a grant writer. Now, for those of you who are saying, man, how much does it cost? It may cost you quite a bit of money, particularly if you're starting out, because grant writers, there may be a few that say pay me on the back end, as a percentage, hire me, on staff as a result of compensation. Not sure how many do that. Some may do that. But the majority of good grant writers are going to want their money up front, because the success of landing a grant is not based upon who's writing the grant. So for those of you who are new to the business, new to the industry, and you're trying to figure out what to do, how to do it, who's writing your grant does not necessarily have an impact on the grant itself. What has the overwhelming impact on the grant is the quality of the content. Hear me good. The quality of the content and the quality of the ideas that are being presented in the grant itself. You can have an amazing writer. You can have someone who has an amazing track record in grant writing, and if the idea stinks, if it's a bad idea, if the concept is not relevant to the funder and the problem they're trying to solve, then what good is a grant writer at all? Right? So it comes down to the concept. It comes down to the track record of the organization. It comes down to you as an organization, a leader. Do you have the infrastructure to actually support this idea, especially if it's a major grant? So if you're in this weird space where you're just trying to figure it out and you don't know if you need a grant writer, but you're too small to pay for it, you can't afford it, what tips can I give you? Well, these are some tips that I've shared before, but I think they're worth sharing again. I cannot stress enough, if you're new, and even if you're a mature organization, this strategy just makes a ton of sense. It's important for you to have a completed grant application, and you want to do the most complex one you can find. It's important for you to, if you're not going to have a grant application complete, you want to have an FAQ database or a very detailed strategic plan that answers all the questions funders that you're working with now and potential funders you want to work with. It answers all the questions that they have, because the more you can get it out and done with at the top of the year, whether it's a calendar year or a fiscal year, the more you're positioning yourself to say that we have the answers to the questions that our potential funders and our new funders are going to be asking us. And if you're able to do that, you're going to cut down quite a bit on the level of work it will take to write grants throughout a 12-month cycle. Even if you hire a grant writer, handing them this document gives them perspective about your organization. It lets them know what you're about. It lets them know what they're dealing with as your grant writer. And it cuts down on unnecessary conversations and speeds up the process. You can do yourself a whole lot of good by having this stuff already written down, already documented. And if you cannot afford a grant writer, still, one of the things that this document does for you that I'm talking about, this FAQ document, this standard grant application, or whatever you want to call it, you can hire staff, small, affordable consulting staff, who can complete a grant application for you. Okay? Who can complete a grant application for you based upon the content, the core content that you've drafted in your standard grant application. This takes the thinking out of it, right? Because now you're saying, hey, look at this standard document we drafted at the top of the year. It represents our organization and everything we believe and what we want and what we want to see happen. And we have this new grant app that we want to complete. So I want you to find the matching answers from our FAQ database, find the matching answers from our standard grant application or our strategic plan. I want you to insert it into the appropriate question of this particular grant application we're going after. And then I want you to massage the content to make sure what you've put in there from our standard documents actually matches what the funder's asking for. If you need an affordable way of doing that, that's an affordable way of doing that. And so the question you gotta be asking me is, all right, well, great. Well, where do I find that person at? One of the places that I love to go to is Fiverr.com. It's an amazing website. Upwork.com, amazing website. You can go get a, you can find all types of gig websites. You can find virtual assistants who can do this stuff for you. Fairly affordable, cheaper than a grant writer. So keep that in mind. Play this podcast back, because if you're going through this journey of trying to figure out how do I determine if I need a grant writer, this is what you got to do. This is what you got to go through. And if you can't afford it, play back these strategies. They work. Trust me, they work. This is Dr. William Clark for the Dr. William Clark Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Have you ever wondered how large nonprofits consistently generate millions of dollars? Have you ever wondered how to write the perfect grant, or how to successfully manage a grant, or even how to find money beyond grants? Hi, my name is Dr. William Clark, and I'm the creator and instructor of What You Should Know Before Applying for Grants. This masterclass has over 28 modules of training, and it comes with tools, tips, and tricks on how to generate significant money for your nonprofit. Some students have been fortunate enough to build six-figure programs, and others have been fortunate enough to triple their fundraising results because of this masterclass. Whatever your fundraising goals are, this masterclass can help you achieve them. To register your seat, simply go to mysixfigurefunding.com. That's mysixfigurefunding.com, and you'll be taken immediately into our student portal where you can access all of our trainings. You can take the trainings on demand, at your own pace, and at any time. You even can interact with other students and me all online from the comfort of your home or your office. If you want to secure your seat today for this masterclass, what you should know before applying for grants, simply go to mysixfigurefunding.com. Again, that's mysixfigurefunding.com. And I'm looking forward to learning with you and growing with you as you achieve your fundraising goals for your nonprofit.